have a fun lesson for you today. You're going to learn English through stories. We're going to read 4 different news articles together, and you're going to learn advanced vocabulary, advanced grammar, and correct pronunciation. Welcome back to JForrest English. Of course, I'm Jennifer. Now let's get started. First, I'll read the headline. TikTok allows Europe to access research software with eye on EU online content rules. First, let's talk about this with eye on. That might sound a little odd. This is an idiom in English. Now, grammatically, the idiom is with an eye on something. Notice the difference here. They left out the article. This is commonly done in headlines of news articles because they always try to be short and concise, and it's easy to omit an article, but grammatically it is required. It's just an acceptable thing to do specifically with headlines of news articles. With an eye on something, this is an idiom, and this means to be focused on a particular thing or area. So here, with an eye on EU online content rules, European Union, that's EU. So TikTok allows researchers to access the research software. But they're accessing this software, or TikTok is allowing them to do so, only focused on this specific area, online content rules, because there are many other areas within this research software, but the researchers, the EU researchers, won't have access to all of that. They'll only have access to the online content rules because that's what with an eye on means. Don't worry about writing down the information because I've created a free lesson PDF, so you can look in the description for the link to download that. Let's continue. TikTok on Thursday opened up its research software. When you open up something to someone, it means you make it available. So here, they opened up. What did they open up? The something is the research software to someone. In this case, researchers, people who conduct research. So to open up something to someone means to make it available. Now, in this case, you must use the phrasal verb, open up. You can't just say to open something to someone. It's open up. So I might say, I'm going to open up my analytics to this company. I'm going to make it available. And you do that when whatever you're opening up is not available to the general public. So normally, that person would not have access to my analytics, but I'm opening it up to them. So here, opened up its research software to researchers. In Europe, ahead of new EU rules. So they're making this available, information that normally wouldn't be available, because soon that is going to be a rule. But notice here, they said ahead of. And that's why I said soon is going to be a rule, because right now, currently, it isn't, because they're opening up the software ahead of. Ahead of means before something happens, ahead of. So in this case, before the rule comes into effect, before. And notice you need ahead of. Ahead of. You may already know the expression to be ahead of schedule. So you have this schedule of all the things that you need to do. And if you're ahead of schedule, it means you're completing the items faster than you anticipated. But if you're behind schedule, it's the opposite. You're completing items slower than anticipated. But notice, ahead of schedule, but behind schedule. So we only need that preposition of with ahead. Ahead of schedule, behind schedule. Ahead of new EU rules requiring big tech. Big tech refers to the big technology companies such as TikTok, Google, Facebook, which is actually owned by Meta, and Twitter, and other big tech companies as well, to do more to police online content. So notice here, police is being used as a verb, to police. You're probably more familiar with it as a noun. I saw a police officer. There's the police. But here, it's a verb. Technically, the police police. That's what they do. They police. So that's the verb, to police. TikTok, owned by Chinese technology conglomerate. A conglomerate is one company that owns many other companies, and usually they're smaller companies. So this one company is made up of smaller companies, and those smaller companies can be completely unrelated to one another. One could sell vacuums and another could be a social media platform. They're totally different, but they're owned by the same one company. So ByteDance is the one company that owns many other companies, one of those being TikTok. Is one of 19 online platforms and search engines subject to tougher requirements. So here, subject to. Subject, you're probably familiar with this as a noun. One subject you studied in school is likely English. Or maybe a subject you didn't like in school was history or math or English, for example. That's a subject, a school subject. In this case, it's a verb because these online platforms and search engines are subject to tougher requirements. When you're subject to something, it means that is forced upon you as an obligation. For example, cars are subject to, this is our verb, subject to something. To belongs to the expression subject to a high domestic tax. So the cars receive that as an obligation. They have to follow that. They don't have any choice in the manner. So they're subject to tougher requirements that will kick in from August. Kick in means to be activated. So these tougher requirements will be activated, which is a fancier way of simply saying start. They'll start from August. So starting from August, the online platforms will be subject to tougher requirements. So kick in, to be activated, or simply to start. When something starts, that's kick in. We use the phrasal verb to kick in. We use it quite a lot, and how you might use it is, let's say I have a headache and I take Tylenol, which is a pill to help with a headache. It's a brand in North America, at least. And I say, I hope my Tylenol kicks in soon. If I could spell that correctly. Oh, capital T. I hope my Tylenol kicks in soon. I hope the medicine in the Tylenol is activated soon. I hope it starts working soon. Oh, I hope my Tylenol kicks in soon. So we frequently use this with any sort of treatment that you're taking to say, I hope it starts soon. So it will kick in from August under the Digital Services Act. So this is the act that will become a new law, And once that is a law, these online platforms, including TikTok, will be subject to these tougher requirements. And that's why they're opening up their research software ahead of these new rules. They know it's coming soon, so why not just do it now? I guess is their thought process around that. The company said it was still waiting for the European Commission to set out technical conditions for the Application Programming Interface API. Let's take a look at this phrasal verb, set out. When you set something out, in this case, the technical conditions for the Application Programming Interface API, it simply means that you provide a clear explanation or you provide all the details needed. So what are these conditions? TikTok and the other big tech companies, they need to know exactly what the conditions are so they can make sure they're meeting the new requirements. So the European Commission needs to set them out. They need to be very clear about those requirements. Set out technical conditions for the Application Programming Interface API for accessing its data, but decided to go ahead anyway. So here, to go ahead, when you go ahead with something, you simply proceed with it, you proceed to do it. So you proceed. This is very commonly used in a work context. Your boss or a coworker or anyone could say, please go ahead and email the client. So you could simply say, please email the client. But when you say, please go ahead and email the client, it simply means that we've discussed this before and now I'm giving you permission to do this action. So I'm giving you permission to proceed. Oh, please go ahead and do this. It's also commonly used with please go ahead with, but because with is a preposition, your verb needs to be in the gerund form, the ing form. So it could be please go ahead with emailing the client. There's no difference in these two sentences. It's simply the sentence structure that's different. They have the same meaning, but just notice the difference in the sentence structure. So they decided to go ahead anyway. They decided to proceed with opening up their, what did they open up? Their research software. Was that it? They opened up, the research software. They made it available to the researchers. TikTok is proactively rolling out its research API. When you roll something out, it means you make something available for the first time. And by saying proactively, when you do something proactively, it means you do it before you're required to do it. So let's say you know there's a deadline in 2 weeks, but you could just proactively do the task now. And then when your boss asks you, oh, we need to make sure we do this soon, you can say, oh, I already did it. And your boss will be very impressed. Wow, I'm impressed. You proactively did it. So they're making this available for the first time. They're rolling it out and they're doing it proactively before they have to. TikTok is proactively rolling out its research API ahead of further technical guidance. So remember, the European Commission still needs to set out those technical conditions. They still need to explain them or provide the details of them, but TikTok is rolling it out anyway ahead of further technical guidance and launching a commercial content library ahead of DSA compliance deadline. Launching, when you launch something, It also means that you make something available for the first time, make something available, or something starts. So if you launch a business, that business starts. Make something available or when something starts. So it could be the sense that this commercial content library, if they're launching it, they're starting that initiative. But at the same time, they're also making it available. So it means the same thing in this context. But when you launch a business, it means you're starting a business, not that you're making a business available. But I guess you are making your services available to the public. So in a way, it still works for both. So they're launching a commercial content library before the DSA compliance deadline. Compliance, this comes from the verb to comply. And when you comply, it means you follow the official rules and regulations. So compliance deadline, this is the deadline, the date that they have to comply with the rules and regulations. And the rules and regulations are set out in this DSA. So they have to comply with the DSA. So I'll write that out for you. To comply with something. This is to follow the rules, the regulations, or simply the law. The social media app said in a statement. So TikTok released this to the public to let the public know why they were rolling out this research API. All researchers will need to have their own TikTok for Developers account and be located in the United States or Europe to access our research API. Now, this is because they're only opening up their research API to specific people. And those specific people are the researchers in the United States and Europe. The company released an initial version of its research API to academic researchers in the United States earlier this year. An initial version, this is the first version. So when you say, oh, this is the initial report, it's either the first report in a series of reports, or it can also mean it's the first draft and you expect that there will be other drafts, other versions. Because when you launch something, when you make it available, generally you make changes to it based on feedback. So that's why this is probably the initial version, suggesting there will be future versions as well. So you can think of initial as the first in a series. We use this when you're thinking of different ideas. You can say, oh, my initial idea was to go on vacation to Spain. That was your first idea. But then I did some research and I decided to go to Morocco instead. So my initial idea, my first idea. TikTok on Thursday also allowed researchers access to its commercial content API. To comply with DSA rules, so this is where we saw it before, but it was as the noun form compliance. So here, to comply with, to follow the rules and regulations of this DSA, to comply with DSA rules on transparency on paid advertising, the company opened up its database, made it available, but remember, simply to specific people, made it available, opened up its database with information about paid ads and ad metadata. All right, kind of a technical article. Don't worry about some of these technical terms like API. Focus on the new vocabulary you have. And now you can also focus on my pronunciation, because what I'll do is I'll go to the start of the article and I'll read it from start to finish so you can specifically focus on my pronunciation. Let's do that now. TikTok allows Europe to access research software with eye on EU online content rules. TikTok on Thursday opened up its research software to researchers in Europe ahead of new EU rules requiring big tech to do more to police online content. TikTok, owned by Chinese technology conglomerate ByteDance, is one of 19 online platforms and search engines subject to tougher requirements that will kick in from August under the Digital Services Act, DSA. The company said it was still waiting for the European Commission to set out technical conditions for the Application Programming Interface, API, for accessing its data, but decided to go ahead anyway. TikTok is proactively rolling out its research API ahead of further technical guidance and launching a commercial content library ahead of the DSA compliance deadline, the social media app said in a statement. All researchers will need to have their own TikTok for Developers account and be located in the United States or Europe to access our research API. The company released an initial version of its research API to academic researchers in the United States earlier this year. TikTok on Thursday also allowed researchers access to its commercial content API. To comply with DSA rules on transparency on paid advertising, the company opened up its database with information about paid ads and ad metadata. Amazing job. Now let's move on with our next article. Our article is called Time Travel. Let's start the first section. Time travel took a small step away from science fiction and toward science. So you have here is science fiction. Fiction is the opposite of fact. So we have two categories. We have fiction, which is not real, like Harry Potter. And then we have nonfiction, which is real, like a historical biography or autobiography. I wrote those definitions here. So time travel took a step away from fiction. So away from not true and toward true. Here, notice how we have the word toward as a preposition. Two spellings are correct. You can say toward or towards with an S. So if you hear someone say towards with an S, it's not incorrect. Both of them are grammatically correct and acceptable. And towards science recently, when physicists discovered that subatomic particles known as neutrinos, just listen to my pronunciation, neutrinos, can exceed the speed of light. So if you exceed something, it means you've gone beyond it. Now, in this case, they're talking about speed. So to go beyond means to go faster than. If you exceeded your spending limit on your credit card, you've gone beyond that limit, which means you've spent more money than you have available. And notice here we have can, which is a modal verb, and then we have exceed, which is the base verb. So grammatically, you always have modal plus base verb, not the infinitive can to exceed. No, just can exceed. So modal plus base verb can exceed the speed of light. So these neutrinos, which are subatomic particles, don't worry, I don't know what a neutrino is. I don't really know what a subatomic particle is because I'm not a physicist, but I understand that they're particles and they can go faster than the speed of light. That is what I know based on the article. The unassuming particle. Unassuming is an adjective. And when you describe something as unassuming, it means it doesn't attract a lot of interest or attention. So maybe you're walking down a street and there's a restaurant, but it doesn't attract your interest or attention because maybe it's very small. It doesn't look very nice from the outside. There isn't a lot of decorations. The sign for the restaurant is very small, so you almost don't even notice the restaurant. So it's an unassuming restaurant, but you go in and the food is delicious, but you almost didn't notice it because it's unassuming. So these particles, these neutrinos, are unassuming. They don't attract a lot of attention or interest, likely because they're just very small. They're not considered something that's very important in science. The unassuming particle, it is electrically neutral, small, but with a non-zero mass. So this is simply giving us more information about what this particle is, because the average person does not know what a neutrino is. A physicist knows what this is, but the average person does not. So this is giving us more information on this particle. The unassuming particle, it is electrically neutral, small, but with a non-zero mass and able to penetrate. Now notice here, able to penetrate. Is something missing from this expression? And able to penetrate. The expression is to be able to. That's the full expression. But notice, it is electrically neutral and able to penetrate. So when we have and, you don't need to repeat the main verb. So you can say, for example, she is tall and thin. Okay? She is tall and thin. So you don't have to say she is tall and is thin. You can get rid of this main verb and just say she is tall and thin. The same thing is happening here. The only difference is instead of having one simple word like tall, we have all of this information. So it's easy to forget that this is also attached to able to, because the expression is not able to, it's be able to. Okay, so for example, you can't say she able to speak Japanese. You can't say that. This is grammatically incorrect because the verb to be is missing. So I'll put a frowny face and an X. She is able to speak Japanese. So now this is correct because we have to be able and then your infinitive. So that is what's happening here, and able to, but we're using the verb to be for both sections, before and after and. So don't forget that with able to. And able to penetrate, when you penetrate something, it simply means you go into. So let's say I'm putting cream on my skin. When the cream goes into my skin and you can no longer see it, it means the cream penetrated my skin. It went into my skin. So this neutron, this neutrinos, can go into your skin. It can penetrate the human form. Undetected. So you don't see something going into your skin because they're not visible. They're so small that you can't see them. So that means undetected, not visible, not known, not visible, or not known, undetected. Is on its way to becoming a rock star of the scientific world. When you see this dash here and then another dash, it means you can remove all of the information between the dashes and the sentence would be grammatically correct. For example, let me read it without the information in blue. The unassuming particle is on its way to becoming a rock star of the scientific world. Grammatically correct. The information between the dashes is additional supplementary information. And in this case, it gives you more information about what the neutrinos is because, as I said, the average person just doesn't know. Don't worry about writing all this down because I summarize everything in the free lesson PDF. So you can look in the description below to download the free lesson PDF. Let's continue. Researchers in Geneva sent the neutrinos hurtling through an underground corridor. Let's take a look at hurtling. This means to move very fast, but it also implies in a dangerous way. So when these neutrinos were hurtling through the underground corridor, so imagine the corridor is going straight and the neutrinos are going very fast, but maybe they're banging against the sides of the walls. They're crashing into each other, not in an orderly, straight way. So you can use this, for example, with drivers. You might say the delivery driver hurtled up my driveway. So he came up your driveway, he drove up your driveway very quickly, but also very dangerously. So quickly, and maybe he's swerving. There's an object here. He's going right for it. Maybe you're standing here and he doesn't seem to be stopping. He hurtled up your driveway. Let's continue. Researchers in Geneva sent the neutrinos hurtling through an underground corridor toward their colleagues, or towards, remember, their colleagues 730 kilometers away in Italy. The neutrinos arrived promptly. Promptly is an adverb, and it means quickly, without delay, but also at the scheduled time. So for example, the meeting will start promptly at 9 a.m. Often when you schedule a meeting at 9, some people might come to the meeting 9:03, 9:05, just a little bit late. But if you say the meeting will start promptly at 9, I will start the presentation at 9:00, not 9:01 or 9:02, promptly at 9. So immediately at 9. So in this case, the neutrinos arrived promptly, so we can say quickly without delay. So promptly, in fact, that they triggered what scientists are calling the unthinkable. Let's look at triggered and unthinkable. So first, triggered. When something triggers something, it simply means it causes it to start. So the fact that the neutrinos traveled so promptly caused something else to start. And that something else is that scientists are now rethinking time travel. So that's the something. You could say, for example, speaking in public triggers my anxiety. So speaking in public causes my anxiety to start. I wrote that example here for you. Now, the unthinkable, this is when something is just so shocking or unlikely that it's difficult for you to imagine, difficult for you to actually form a picture. For example, a world without language would be unthinkable. Can you even contemplate, can you think about what life would be like if nobody spoke any language? Language was not invented. A human being never uttered, which means spoke, never uttered a word, never spoke a word, ever. Could you even imagine how we would interact with each other? It's unthinkable. It's so shocking and unlikely we can't even really think about it. So time travel is another thing that's just unthinkable. Can you imagine what life would be like if we could time travel? It's unthinkable.
that everything they have learned, known, or taught stemming from the last 100 years of the physics discipline may need to be reconsidered. So this is the unthinkable, that everything that physicists know about their discipline, they may need to think about it again if time travel is possible. I want to point out the past simple here of the verb learn because you might be confused as to why it has a T. So learnt is the preferred spelling and pronunciation in British English. In American English, which I teach, the preferred spelling and pronunciation is learned. So notice we have a soft T here, learnt. And then in American, learned with a soft D, learned. Both of them are grammatically correct. It's just two countries prefer two different words. Everything they have learned, known, or taught, stemming from. Here, to stem from simply means come from, to come from. Come from. So in this case, because it's in the gerund form, I'll put mine in the gerund form. Coming from the last 100 years of the physics discipline may need to be reconsidered. So when you add re in front of the verb, it means you do the verb again. So you need to consider again. So that means consider again because you add reconsidered. We need to consider it again. So let's say you asked your boss for a promotion and your boss said no. Maybe you could say, can you reconsider? Can you consider my proposal again? And most likely he'll say no, but hey, maybe he'll say, I guess I could reconsider. And then you can explain again why you deserve a promotion. And maybe this time your boss will say yes. So it's always possible for someone to reconsider. Let's continue on. The issue at stake. So at stake is simply when something is being considered. So here, the issue being considered, the issue at stake, so being considered, is a tiny segment of time, precisely 60 nanoseconds. So now they're going to explain what 60 nanoseconds is because the average person who is not a physicist does not know. So 60 nanoseconds is 60 billionths of a second. So you have 1 second and then you divide that 1 second into billions and you take 60 of them. For me, I can't really comprehend what 60 billionths of a second is, to be honest, because a second is like that. And imagine you take 60 billionths of that second. It would be so fast. It's unthinkable. I can't even imagine what that would be. So notice I just used unthinkable. This is how much faster than the speed of light the neutrinos manage to go in their underground travels and at a consistent rate. Even allowing for a margin of error of 10 billionths of a second, this stands as proof that it is possible to race against light and win. So here they're comparing the speed of the neutrinos to the speed of light, which is just so fast that you and I, average people, can't really understand how fast it is because it just happens so quickly. So they're just letting you know it happened faster than the speed of light. And this allowing for a margin of error, they're saying even if our calculation was incorrect, don't worry, it's still accurate. So they accounted for that. They allowed some miscalculation in their formula, and the neutrinos are still faster than the speed of light, even if their calculation is somewhat inaccurate. So that's a margin of error. You'll see this a lot in studies, scientific studies, research studies, a margin of error of 10 billionths of a second. The duration of the experiment, duration is the length. The duration of the experiment, the length of this experiment, the entire time of the experiment. So length or entire time of the experiment also accounted for. When you account for something, you simply consider it. So they considered that margin of error, that their calculation may be somewhat inaccurate. So to consider. Also accounted for, considered. So here, accounted for something. So notice the preposition. You account for something, but you consider something. So we don't use considered for. It's just considered because we don't need the preposition for. And considered and ruled out. The phrasal verb to rule something out is when you no longer have something as a possibility. So to no longer have an option as a possibility. So basically it means to exclude an option, to exclude an option. So let's say you are considering different options. Maybe you're going to give your team a promotion, give them an extra vacation day, or give them free lunch on Fridays. Those are your three options to show your support for your staff. But you're going to rule out promotions. You're going to no longer consider that as an option because you don't have the financial resources to offer promotions and it's very expensive. So you're going to rule out promotions. Now you just have two options to consider. So they ruled out any possible lunar effects. Lunar is the moon, so effects from the moon because the moon can influence time. And tidal bulges. I don't know what a bulge is. I assume it's similar to a wave, and tidal relates to the tide. So going when the water goes in and out, that is called the tide. So tidal bulges in the Earth's crust. So this information is just to let you know that their calculation considered many different factors to understand if they are wrong. And they're still saying, even if we take all of this into account, consider all of this, the neutrinos are still faster than the speed of light. Let's continue. Nevertheless, the transition word nevertheless is used when you are going to have a contrast. So here they're talking about all the reasons why the neutrinos are faster than the speed of light. But now, because I have nevertheless, I know they're going to introduce evidence to say that this might not be true because there has to be a contrast. So this is a transition word used to introduce a contrasting point. Nevertheless, there's plenty of reason to remain skeptical. Skeptical means I'm not sure if I believe you, or I'm not sure if I believe this topic. I'm not sure if I believe that we can travel through time. I'm skeptical. So not sure if the person can be trusted or believed. Person or information. In this case, it's the information they're presenting. Information can be trusted or believed. So, I'm skeptical. I'm not sure. According to Harvard University science historian Peter Gallison, Albert Einstein, of course, Einstein's relativity theory has been pushed harder than any theory in the history of the physical sciences. Pushed harder than, it means that every scientist has tried to prove that his theory is not correct. So they've pushed his theory harder than any theory in the history of the physical sciences. Yet each prior challenge, prior means previous, so each challenge that had previously happened, prior, previous. You see this a lot in job interviews. Do you have any prior experience? Do you have any previous experience? So let me write that for you. Do you have any prior experience in Excel? So Excel is a Microsoft software for organizing data. Do you have any prior experience in Excel? Do you have any previous experience? Yet each prior challenge has come to no avail. So remember I said they've tried to prove that Einstein's theory is inaccurate or incorrect, but it's come to no avail, which means they have not been successful. So no avail means not successful. Let's review this example. I asked my boss for a promotion, but to no avail. So notice the expression is to no avail, and this means not successful. So I didn't get the promotion. My boss said no, but to no avail. I'm hopeful he'll reconsider. I'm hopeful, that's just another way of saying I hope he'll reconsider. So remember, we talked about this. Consider it again and change his decision. But he's skeptical. I don't know. I'm not sure if Jennifer's ready for a promotion. He's skeptical that I'm ready for a management position. So here we used a lot of expressions in one thought, one advanced thought. Let's continue. So is time travel just around the corner? When something is just around the corner, it means happening soon. Happening soon. So you could say, my vacation is just around the corner. Happening soon. So is time travel happening soon, just around the corner? The prospect, so the prospect is the idea that time travel is just around the corner. The prospect has certainly been wrenched much closer to the realm of possibility. This simply means moved closer to the realm of possibility, meaning that something is possible. So a simple way of saying this is the prospect has certainly been moved towards possibility. Now that a major physical hurdle, a hurdle is an obstacle, something that prevents you from achieving a goal. So an obstacle, hurdle, obstacle. The speed of light. So this is the obstacle, the hurdle for time travel. The fact that we need to travel faster than the speed of light. And so far, nothing has traveled faster than the speed of light until these neutrinos has been cleared. So to clear the hurdle means to get rid of it, to eliminate it. If particles, these neutrinos, if particles can travel faster than light, in theory, traveling back in time is possible. That's unthinkable, isn't it? How anyone harnesses that, to harness something is when you use something successfully, to use something successfully. Use something successfully. For example, we have now harnessed the power of the sun through solar panels. So you put a solar panel on the roof of your house and it harnesses the sun, the energy of the sun. It uses that energy successfully by then heating your house. So we've already harnessed many things in our environment. Why not time travel? How anyone harnesses that, so how anyone uses time travel successfully to some kind of helpful end is far beyond the scope of any modern technologies. Okay, So far beyond the scope of. When something is beyond the scope of, it means that it is not included in. Not included in. For example, teaching you about Einstein's theory of relativity is beyond the scope of this lesson, which means it's not included in this lesson. It doesn't mean it's not important. It's just beyond the scope of this lesson. It's not included in this lesson. So it's beyond the scope of any modern technology, however, and will be left to future generations to explore. When you leave something to someone, it means that you give the responsibility to someone else. So the future generations now have the responsibility to take the information from this article, the fact that these neutrinos can travel faster than the speed of light, and try to harness that, try to turn it into something tangible that we can use and benefit from. So that's not our responsibility. We're going to leave that to future generations to explore. So that's the end of the article. What I'll do now is I'll go to the beginning and I'll read the article from start to finish, and this time you can focus on my pronunciation. Time travel. Time travel took a small step away from science fiction and toward science recently when physicists discovered that subatomic particles, known as neutrinos, can exceed the speed of light. The unassuming particle, it is electrically neutral, small, but with a non-zero mass, and able to penetrate the human form undetected, is on its way to becoming a rock star of the scientific world. Researchers in Geneva sent the neutrinos hurtling through an underground corridor toward their colleagues 730 kilometers away in Italy. The neutrinos arrived promptly. So promptly, in fact, that they triggered what scientists are calling the unthinkable, that everything they have learned, known, or taught stemming from the last 100 years of the physics discipline may need to be reconsidered. The issue at stake is a tiny segment of time, precisely 60 nanoseconds, which is 60 billionths of a second. This is how much faster than the speed of light the neutrinos manage to go in their underground travels and at a consistent rate. Even allowing for a margin of error of 10 billionths of a second, this stands as proof that it is possible to race against light and win. The duration of the experiment also accounted for and ruled out any possible lunar effects or tidal bulges in the Earth's crust. Nevertheless, there's plenty of reason to remain skeptical. According to Harvard University science historian Peter Gallison, Einstein's relativity theory has been pushed harder than any theory in the history of the physical sciences. Yet each prior challenge has come to no avail, and relativity has so far refused to buckle. So is time travel just around the corner? The prospect has certainly been wrenched much closer to the realm of possibility now that a major physical hurdle, the speed of light, has been cleared. If particles can travel faster than light, in theory, traveling back in time is possible. How anyone harnesses that to some kind of helpful end is far beyond the scope of any modern technologies, however, and will be left to future generations to explore.
Amazing job. Now let's move on with our next article.
Our headline, The Young Workers Dressing to Stand Out. As you can see, her outfit really stands out. Imagine there are all these other workers and they're wearing a plain white shirt and black pants. And she is wearing this very bright, colorful, and vintage outfit. She would stand out. The phrasal verb stand out, this means to be noticeable. To be noticeable in a group. So you have a group of different objects and one of them is more noticeable than the others. That object stands out. And it could stand out because of its size, it's bigger than the others or smaller, its color, or other reasons as well. So to stand out, to be very noticeable, and especially compared to other things or even people. So she stands out because of her outfit, what she's wearing. Let's continue on. Traditional thinking has generally been to dress to fit into the workplace. Here's another phrasal verb, to fit in. So the phrasal verb is to fit in, but when you specify the noun, in this case, the workplace, then we add into, to fit into the workplace. So I'll highlight all of this. So the phrasal verb to fit in is when you have a feeling that you belong or are accepted. When you're a new employee, you might not feel like you fit in. Or if you're new to a neighborhood or a sports team or any group of people, a new school, that's a great example. You might not feel like you fit in. You might not feel like you belong or are accepted. And unfortunately, a lot of my students don't feel like they fit in because of their English skills. So of course, to not fit in isn't a good feeling. You want to feel like you belong and are accepted. You want to feel like you fit in. So to fit into the workplace, a feeling of belonging or being accepted by a group. So they're saying traditionally you would wear the same clothes that your coworkers wear so you fit in. You have this sense of belonging. But this person here is doing something different. She's dressing to stand out, to be more noticeable, which could have the impact that she doesn't fit in. Let's find out. But in the pandemic era, these rules are going by the wayside. When something goes by the wayside, it means it's gone. It's no longer followed. It's outdated. And in this case, they're talking about a rule. So by saying the rule has gone by the wayside, it means nobody is following that rule anymore. So here's the definition here. Now, of course, in our modern era of technology, we could say that landlines, phones that are connected in your house, landlines have gone by the wayside. No one really uses them anymore, right? So in this case, you can use it when you use something, you stop using it, or you stop following a certain rule or practice. Monica Saleh, that's the woman here who dresses to stand out. Monica Saleh doesn't wear your average business casual clothing at the office. Instead, the 31-year-old software marketing manager has become well known for her love of rare vintage fashion at a large tech firm where she works in Indianapolis, US. Okay, vintage clothing is clothing from older decades or older generations. So from the 50s or 60s or 70s. So not from this modern time. It's from a past time or a past generation. And we can see an example of vintage clothing here. So this pattern, this color combination was very popular in, I don't know, maybe the 60s or the 70s. And this shirt was made in the 60s or 70s. And this represents vintage. And they also had this adjective here, rare. So a rare, of course, means not common, difficult to find. So it's not easy to find clothing that was made from the 60s or 70s, vintage clothing. You have to go to very special stores. So not common, not common, not easy to find. Now let's take a look at her job title. She's a software marketing manager. Now, a lot of times I hear mistakes when students say their job title because they don't use an article. You have to use an article. I'm a software manager. I'm an accountant. So N if you have a vowel sound, and then if you have a consonant sound. Don't forget that article. It sounds very beginner English, and you might not fit in. And you would stand out in a negative way. You would stand out because it's obvious that English isn't your first language if you make such a basic mistake like forgetting to put an article in front of your job title. So don't make that mistake. And if you do want to stand out in the workplace, be noticeable for your good qualities, then I want you to download this free speaking guide where I share 6 tips on how to speak English fluently and confidently. This is absolutely free. It's available on my website, so you can just look in the description for the link to download it. Absolutely free. And you can also find the link to download all the notes from the lesson in the description below. Let's continue on. Her outfits. So an outfit is a complete set of clothing that you wear. So it includes your shirt, your pants, your shoes. So it's everything that you're wearing is considered your outfit. So not just your shirt. You can only see my shirt now, but it would be my shirt and my pants. And even if I had shoes or a purse, all of that together would be considered an outfit. So her outfit, the total of all the clothes she's wearing. So in her case, the outfit would include her shirt, her pants. You can't really see it, but it looks like she has some colorful socks, her shoes, and let's say she was wearing a belt as well. That would be part of her outfit. Her outfits are a far cry from the average plain t-shirt and jeans. If something is a far cry from something else, it means it's very different from. Very different from. Very different from. So it's saying that her colleagues just wear, your plain white, gray, or blue t-shirt and jeans. That's your casual business attire, your outfit. But she wears something very different. So her outfits, what she wears, the total of what she wears is very different from other outfits. It's a far cry from. Now, one thing that my students find is that studying English is a far cry from using English in the real world. So they get comfortable studying English in the classroom, but then they get out there, they go to a party with native English speakers, or they go to a meeting or a networking event, or just to work. And being in the real world and using your English, communicating with native speakers is a far cry from communicating with your teacher in the classroom. And that's why a lot of students feel like they don't fit in and they stand out in a negative way. They stand out because their accent is too strong, or they use very unnatural expressions, right? So this is how you can use this expression, a far cry from. All right, let's continue. Her outfits are a far cry from the average plain t-shirt and jeans she sees among her colleagues, and she says her bold style has become a great talking point with them. When something is a talking point, is just a conversational topic. It's something you talk about. That's all that means. So her outfits are a talking point. It's something when she sees her colleagues, they say, oh, wow, where did you get that shirt? Tell me more about it. What generation is it from? Who designed it? That's how it's a talking point. So here's a quote. So this, because we have these quotation marks here, it means that this woman, what's her name again? Monica. This woman, Monica, is now saying these words. So she said, having that opportunity to break down walls. When you break down walls, it just means to eliminate them. So it's a metaphorical wall. It's saying, here I am and here my colleague is, and there's a wall between us so we don't communicate easily. But if we eliminate that wall, if we break down that wall, then now I can easily communicate with my colleague. Having that opportunity to break down walls with people across different teams by talking about my outfits, this is how she breaks down the walls. So how she initiates conversation with her colleagues about her outfits is pretty awesome, she says. The company I work for is pretty large, and ever since I've been here, my notoriety has been extended through my fashion and what I wear. Being around people who might not know as much about these designers and catching their eye has always been an icebreaker. So an icebreaker is a way to initiate a conversation with someone. So if you're at a party or a networking event or even a meeting and there are a lot of new people and you've never met those people, you want an icebreaker. You want a way to initiate a conversation with someone. So at a party, an icebreaker could be a simple question. Oh, so how do you know Jane? If it's Jane's party, and you could go up to each person and that's your icebreaker. That's how you initiate conversation. How do you know Jane? How long have you known Jane? And you can talk about the host because both of you know Jane. So an icebreaker is a way to initiate, which is a way of saying start, to initiate conversation for the first time. So after you initiate that conversation, then the icebreaker is complete. All right, let's move on. Saleh is not the only person pushing back against traditional office wear conventions. Okay, when you push back against something, it means you resist it. You say, I don't agree with that. I don't want to do that. So you resist something. To resist something. So let's say your office has a new policy that says everyone must wear a suit and a tie to work. But before, you wore jeans and a t-shirt. So a lot of people could be upset about the change and they could push back against, because against is part of the expression. You push back against something, which means you say, no, I don't want to do that. I don't agree with that. I don't think that's a good idea. That's how you push back against something. So she's pushing back against your traditional t-shirt and jeans by wearing this very vintage, rare clothing that makes her stand out, be very noticeable. So she's not the only person pushing back against traditional office wear conventions, with many showing off their unconventional office attire. Attire is another word for outfit. So you could say office attire or office outfits. Notice here, if you have outfit, you need it with an S. There, because there's more than one. Their outfits. But attire does not take a plural form, sorry. So you just keep it without the S. Their attire is inappropriate. But you would have to say their outfits are inappropriate. Remember, you have to conjugate your verb with whatever the subject is. So here, their attire, but because it's singular, it represents it. It is inappropriate. Their outfits, because it's plural, it's they. They are inappropriate, okay? But it means the exact same thing. It's just a different word for it. And remember, an outfit is the totality of your clothing, of what you're wearing. So many are showing off. When you show off, it means that you just make it known to other people. So to show off their attire on social media, well, how would you show off your attire? You would take a picture of it and you would post it on social media with a headline and a hashtag in an attempt to have it seen by a large number of people. So that's how you would show it off, it being your attire. Some workers, especially younger ones, are swapping out mundane white shirt, black trouser combos with luxe loungewear sets. All right, lots to review here. So first, let's talk about our adjectives. We have mundane. This is very ordinary, not interesting, could be a little bit boring, right? Because if it's very ordinary, not interesting, so that really probably represents boring. So a white shirt, black trousers, that's pretty mundane. Everybody wears that. So it's a little bit boring. It doesn't stand out, but you probably fit in pretty easily wearing that. Okay, so that's mundane. Now, combos is short for combination. So you can shorten it to combo. You see this a lot in fast food restaurants, McDonald's. You could have a burger with fries and a drink. That's a combo. It's a combination of 3 different items into one meal, a combo. Okay, and then luxe is short form for luxury, but in this case, we're using it as an adjective. So what do we need? Luxurious. Notice the pronunciation, luxurious. So this, as you can see, we have our lux and we just take the short form. It's not the most common, to be honest. I would personally say luxurious or luxury. I wouldn't shorten it to lux, but that's what they did here. Okay, now our phrasal verb, to swap out. Now, you swap out one thing for another thing, which means you just replace one thing for another thing. So first I had my mundane white t-shirt, but I swapped it out for this flower shirt, so I stand out. Okay, so you replace one thing with another thing. Are swapping out. Replace, I'll just say replace A with B. So white t-shirt is A, and then these luxurious loungewear sets, that's B. So you swap it out. And that's the end of the article. So perhaps if you want to stand out at work, you can consider wearing vintage clothing. That's the moral of the story here. So now what I'll do is I'll read the article from start to finish, and this time you can focus on my pronunciation. The young workers dressing to stand out. Traditional thinking has generally been to dress to fit into the workplace. But in the pandemic era, these rules are going by the wayside for some employees. Monica Saleh doesn't wear your average business casual clothing at the office. Instead, the 31-year-old software marketing manager has become well known for her love of rare vintage fashion at the large tech firm where she works in Indianapolis, US. Her outfits are a far cry from the average plain t-shirt and jeans she sees among her colleagues, and she says her bold style has become a great talking point with them. Having that opportunity to break down walls with people across different teams by talking about my outfits is pretty awesome, she says. The company I work for is pretty large, and ever since I've been here, my notoriety has been extended through my fashion and what I wear. Being around people who might not know as much about these designers and catching their eye has always been an icebreaker. Saleh is not the only person pushing back against traditional office wear conventions, with many showing off their unconventional office attire on social media. Some workers, especially younger ones, are swapping out mundane white shirt and black trouser combos for luxe loungewear sets.
Amazing job. Now let's review our last article.
Our headline, Lab-Grown Meat. Beef for dinner without killing animals or the environment. So in this picture, as you can see, this looks like a piece of meat, right? But clearly, this is also a lab. So this is meat that was made in a lab and no animal had to be killed. Wow, the future is here. So let's learn about this very interesting topic. Imagine biting into a juicy burger that was produced without killing animals. Let's take a look at this adjective, juicy. It describes the burger. Notice my pronunciation, burger, 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 into a juicy burger. When something is juicy, this is an adjective that normally describes food, and it means it has a lot of juice, which you can think of as a lot of liquid. So think of a piece of fruit like a pineapple and all the liquid in that pineapple. So a pineapple is juicy. A mango is juicy. What's another juicy fruit? Can you think of any others? Share it in the comments. So imagine biting into a juicy burger. And I should note that generally, in terms of describing meat, juicy is a positive quality. You want your burger to be juicy. The opposite is dry. So let me write this. Opposite of juicy is dry, because when something is dry, there's no liquid at all. Now, generally, this is used as a negative. Oh, the burger was really dry. The meat was dry. It's a negative. So a juicy burger that was produced without killing animals. Notice here we have our ing, our gerund form of the verb. Why? Because without is a preposition, and we use the gerund verb after prepositions, without killing animals. Meat grown in a laboratory. Notice the pronunciation here, because there is a difference between American English, which I teach, and British English. In American English, laboratory, laboratory. But notice in the headline, they're referring to lab-grown meat. If you can't remember the correct pronunciation, just call it a lab, because the majority of the time we do call it a lab. It's the short form for the word laboratory. I'm going to the lab. I need to go to the lab. Can you drop me off at the lab? Okay, Meat grown in a laboratory from cultured cells, which I imagine is what we see in this image here, is turning that vision into a reality. When you turn a vision into a reality, it's another way of saying it becomes real. So right now, for example, Elon Musk is turning his vision of going to Mars into a reality, right? Every day he's getting closer and closer with the actions that he's taking. And right now, you, by watching this video and learning these advanced expressions, you're turning your vision of speaking English fluently and confidently into a reality, right? So let me write that down for you. So here it is. And notice again, we have that ing, our gerund verb, because we have the preposition of. I'm turning my vision of speaking English fluently and confidently into a reality. And if you want more help with that, you should get this free speaking guide, because this guide was designed to teach you how to speak English fluently and confidently in 6 easy steps. It's absolutely free and you can download it on my website. The link is in the description. And you can also download the free lesson PDF, which summarizes everything in this lesson. The link is also in the description. Okay, let's continue on. Several startups are developing lab-grown beef, pork, poultry, and seafood. So these are the different types of meat that are being developed in the lab, the laboratory. If widely adopted, this means that many people are using the product or service. And in this case, the product is lab grown meat. So using would be purchasing it, right? That would mean it's widely adopted. So many people are using it. Many people are using it. And notice, if widely adopted, well, the subject is lab grown meat, but they just placed it after. But you could also say if lab grown meat is widely adopted, and then you could continue on with your sentence. So just an alternative way of writing that. Lab grown meat, also called clean meat, so this is an alternative name, could eliminate much of the cruel, unethical treatment of animals raised for food. It could also reduce the considerable environmental costs of meat production. Okay, notice they're using the modal verb could. It could reduce the environmental cost. It could eliminate. They're doing that because this is right now a hypothetical situation, because it doesn't actually exist in the market fully. It's still being developed today. So could as a modal verb is used to show possibility or potential. Possibility, potential. It doesn't mean it will happen. And remember, because it's a modal verb, it's followed by the base verb, not the infinitive. That's why it's could eliminate and not could to eliminate. So modal plus base verb, that's the sentence structure. All right, it could also reduce the considerable. This is a nice adjective. Considerable as an adjective means large when we're talking about the degree. So how much of an environmental cost is there? If I say there's a considerable environmental cost, it's a large amount of environmental cost. So large. An alternative word for it would be significant. You could also say significant environmental costs of meat production. So you could say in a more everyday context, I have a considerable amount of work to do. So it's telling you how much, a large amount. The meat is made by first taking a muscle sample from an animal, of course, muscle. Now, muscles are all over our body. I'm just pointing at a common one. I don't have very big muscles, but there's a muscle there. Technicians, these are the people who work in a lab tech. So we also commonly shorten the word technician because it's very common to casually say, I'm a lab tech. I'm a laboratory technician. Now, of course, if you're writing your formal resume, you wouldn't say lab tech. You would use the full form. But in casual conversation or speech, you would definitely say, oh, I'm a lab tech. Technicians collect stem cells from the tissue. So within muscle, there is tissue. And then within that tissue, there are cells, stem cells from the tissue, multiply them dramatically. So dramatically is a adverb like significantly, dramatically. Again, it means to a large degree. I could also say considerably as an adverb. So it means quite quickly in this context because we're talking about multiplying. So to multiply means you would go from 2 to 4, 4 to 8, 8 to 16, and then be on and on and on. But it does that dramatically. So it happens very quickly and in large quantities. So you could go from 2 stem cells to 1,000 stem cells in a small amount of time. So that would be dramatically. And allow them to differentiate into primitive fibers. So fibers are like strands of hair almost, but they're within your muscle, your tissue. Fibers that then bulk up. In the context of fibers or tissue or muscle, bulk up means to become larger. So you see this a lot in the sports world. If you're about to go to a sports competition, you would probably want to bulk up, which means you would want your muscles to become larger. Before your competition, you would go to the gym, and you would go to the gym a lot because you want to bulk up. It's not just your arm muscles. It could be muscles all over your body. And you'll see advertisements on TV for take this pill and it will help you bulk up, which means it will help you and your muscles, your body become larger. So let me just write that. To become larger, but in the context of your body, your muscles. To become larger. Body, muscles. I don't want to bulk up, but some people clearly do for different reasons. Then bulk up to form muscle tissue. Mosa Meat says that one tissue sample from a cow can yield enough muscle tissue to make 80,000 quarter pounders. Wow. So yield means to produce in the sense of result in, produce, result in. Produce, let me write this, produce, result in. So one tissue sample can yield, produce, result in 80,000 burgers. That's insane. Quarter pounder, if you didn't know, is a burger. It's a burger that is made with a quarter pound of meat. A burger made from a quarter pound of meat. If you like burgers and if you eat at McDonald's, you'll know that a name of a burger at McDonald's is a quarter pounder. You can order a quarter pounder at McDonald's. That is a lot of burgers. Wow. I hope you're enjoying this lesson. And if you are, then I want to tell you about the Finally Fluent Academy. This is my premium training program where we study native English speakers on TV, movies, YouTube, and the news so you can add common vocabulary, learn advanced grammar, improve your listening skills, improve your pronunciation, all at the same time. Plus, you'll get personalized support from me. So you can look in the description for a link on how to become a member. Let's continue. A number of the startups, I think they used this before. I didn't mention it. You probably know this. It's a very common term these days, but a startup is a company that has recently been established. It's a very young company, young in the sense of it's a new company. So a company that has recently been established. A number of the startups say they expect to have products for sale within the next few years. Now, to be honest, this article is quite old. I think it's from 2018. So the next few years could be any day now, this year or next year. So this is going to be coming to your grocery stores. What do you think? Would you buy lab-grown meat knowing that it could reduce environmental damage and it could reduce harm to animals? Is that something that you would want to support? That's an interesting question. Share your comments about lab-grown meat if you would want to eat it or not in the comments. But clean meat, remember this was an alternative name to lab-grown meat, but clean meat will have to overcome a number of barriers if it is to be commercially viable. So if something is commercially viable, viable is another way of saying successful. And how is something commercially successful? Well, it has to be profitable. In order for a company to be viable, successful, they need to make enough money to cover their expenses, which means profitable. So although they're saying commercially viable, it's just another way of really saying profitable, because that is what a commercially viable company is, profitable. But clean meat will have to overcome a number of barriers. A barrier is something that prevents you from getting somewhere. You might be driving down the road and then you get to a bridge and they're doing repairs to the bridge. So they put a barrier in front of the bridge, which could be pylons or just a piece of wood across the bridge, but it prevents you from going any further. It's a barrier. So you will encounter barriers when you're commuting, you're driving. And you can also encounter barriers in terms of problems, difficulties, or challenges because they prevent you from progressing, from going further. And overcome is another way of saying solve. So you solve, eliminate, overcome. Solve, eliminate, get rid of, overcome. You find the solution to. Let's continue on to our cost and taste. To what? You always have to think about what you've read before, and they were just talking about a number of barriers. So now they're telling us about two of these barriers. So you could absolutely say two of these barriers are cost and taste. In 2013, when a burger made from lab-grown meat was presented to journalists, the patty, this is just another way of saying burger, the burger patty, the burger. Generally, think of McDonald's or any fast food restaurant. When you get a burger, it has the bun, the patty, and things like ketchup, mustard, onions, pickles, cheese. So all of that together forms a complete burger. And then the meat in the burger is referred to a patty, the burger patty. So that's the piece of meat in a burger. Let me just write that for you. Burger patty, the piece of meat in a burger. Because remember, a burger is not just the meat, it's the bun and all the other toppings as well. The patty costs more than $300,000. Oh, that's one expensive burger to produce and was overly dry. Here we have that adjective. What's the opposite of dry? Good test. You learn this at the beginning. The opposite of dry is juicy. And what did I say? Is dry a positive thing or a negative thing to describe a burger as dry? It's a negative thing. It's a criticism of that burger. It means it didn't taste very good. And by saying overly means too much than you wanted. So overly, more than you wanted or needed. You could say, the meeting was long. And this is more just stating a fact. The meeting was long. That doesn't necessarily tell you if that's a positive thing or a negative thing. It's just more of a factual thing. But if you say the meeting was overly long, now this is negative because overly means more than you wanted or needed. Let's continue. To receive market approval, clean meat will have to be proved safe to eat. So market approval means it's approved to sell at the grocery store. The government says, yes, you can sell this product at the grocery store. That would be market approval. Meanwhile, traditional meat producers are pushing back. When you push back on something, generally a rule, a policy, a decision, it means you're saying, no, I don't want that, or you're saying, no, we shouldn't do that. You're pushing back. So you're voicing an opposing opinion to push back. Voicing an opposing opinion or view or option. So maybe your boss wants everyone to work an hour later every single day. That's his new idea. Hey team, I have this great idea. We're all going to work an extra hour every single day. But everyone said, no, I'm not doing that. I don't want to do that. We shouldn't do that. That is pushing back. So the employees push back. They said, no, I don't want to do that. We shouldn't do that. That's a bad idea. That would be pushing back. So the traditional meat producers, the farmers, are pushing back, arguing that the lab-generated products are not meat at all and should not be labeled as such. So when you go to the grocery store and you buy a burger, they shouldn't say it's meat if it was grown in a lab. What do you think? Do you agree with that? Despite these challenges, the clean meat companies are forging ahead. So to forge ahead means that they are continuing or progressing despite difficulties. So continue, progress despite difficulties. So in an English learning context, you could say, learning phrasal verbs is very difficult, but I'm going to forge ahead. which means you're not going to quit. You're going to continue studying, continue learning phrasal verbs, continue using phrasal verbs, even though there are difficulties involved. If they can succeed in creating authentic tasting products, so that would be a burger patty that actually tastes like a burger. It's juicy. It has the flavor, the texture. That would be authentic. Authentic tasting products that are also affordable. Remember how expensive it was. Clean meat could make our daily eating habits more ethical and environmentally sustainable. And remember, they're again using that modal could, because at this point, when this article was written, clean meat was not available in the public. So this is just a possibility or potential. Clean meat could make our daily eating habits more ethical and environmentally sustainable. I personally think this is a very interesting topic, so I hope you enjoyed the article and learning about this. So now what I'll do is I'll go to the top and I'll read the article from start to finish, and this time you can focus on my pronunciation. Lab-grown meat. Beef for dinner without killing animals or the environment. Imagine biting into a juicy burger that was produced without killing animals. Meat grown in a laboratory from cultured cells is turning that vision into a reality. Several startups are developing lab-grown beef, pork, poultry, and seafood. If widely adopted, lab-grown meat, also called clean meat, could eliminate much of the cruel, unethical treatment of animals raised for food. It could also reduce the considerable environmental costs of meat production. The meat is made by first taking a muscle sample from an animal. Technicians collect stem cells from the tissue, multiply them dramatically, and allow them to differentiate into primitive fibers that then bulk up to form muscle tissue. Mosa Meat says that one tissue sample from a cow can yield enough muscle tissue to make 80,000 quarter pounders. A number of the startups say they expect to have products for sale within the next few years, but clean meat will have to overcome a number of barriers if it is to be commercially viable. 2 are costs and tastes. In 2013, when a burger made from lab-grown meat was presented to journalists, the patty cost more than $300,000 to produce and was overly dry. To receive market approval, clean meat will have to be proved safe to eat. Meanwhile, traditional meat producers are pushing back, arguing that the lab-generated products are not meat at all and should not be labeled as such. Despite these challenges, the clean meat companies are forging ahead. If they can succeed in creating authentic tasting products that are also affordable, clean meat could make our daily eating habits more ethical and environmentally sustainable.
Congratulations! Think of how much you learned today. Do you want me to make more lessons like this? If you do, put more news in the comments. And of course, make sure you like this lesson, share it with your friends, and subscribe so you're notified every time I post a new lesson. And you can get this free speaking guide where I share 6 tips on how to speak English fluently and confidently. You can click here to download it or look for the link in the description. And now why don't you practice your speaking with this lesson right now?